It started with a tense encounter that no one saw coming. At a public event meant to bring people together, a black man was abruptly ejected by the police. The incident sparked outrage, leaving many questioning how such a thing could happen in a space meant for community and inclusion. But this story didn't end there. Instead of letting anger consume him, the man took an unexpected turn. Just 1 week later, he was at the forefront of a groundbreaking effort to reform policing in his state. How did he transform a personal injustice into a movement for change? And what did it take to turn a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for hope? Stay with us as we unravel this incredible journey of resilience, leadership, and the fight for justice that inspired an entire state to rethink the role of law enforcement. The man, a respected community leader, had attended the event to listen and engage, like so many others that day. He had no reason to believe it would end in confrontation. But as he sat quietly among the crowd, something shifted. A minor misunderstanding quickly escalated, and within minutes, police officers were surrounding him. People watched in shock as he was escorted out, his questions ignored, his dignity stripped away in plain view of everyone. What could he have done differently? That question echoed in his mind long after the event ended. But instead of dwelling on the humiliation, he began asking a bigger question. Why do moments like this keep happening? That single thought drove him to dig deeper into the policies and practices shaping law enforcement. He realized this was bigger than him. It was about his community and their right to be treated with fairness and respect. As news of the incident spread, reactions poured in from all sides. Some people were outraged, calling it another example of systemic bias in policing. Others defended the officers, arguing they were just following protocol. Social media lit up with debates, and the event became a flashpoint in a much larger conversation about justice and accountability. The man, meanwhile, kept a low profile, watching the situation unfold with a mix of frustration and determination. Behind the scenes, he began reaching out to community members, activists, and even local leaders. Each conversation revealed the same underlying issues: mistrust, miscommunication, and a lack of meaningful dialogue between law enforcement and the people they served. But the deeper he looked, the more complex the problem seemed. Changing policies was one thing, changing minds was something else entirely. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, however painful, might be the key to something greater. The pressure was mounting. The man's quiet determination had turned into a full-blown mission, and he was gathering momentum. Community meetings were growing larger, with more voices joining in. People who had similar stories of feeling unseen, unheard, and unfairly treated. The room would often hum with emotion, ranging from anger to hope, as they brainstormed ideas for real change. But not everyone was on board. Some local officials resisted, dismissing the movement as unrealistic. Even within his community, there were doubts. Could one man really take on a system so deeply rooted in tradition and power? The man stayed focused, though, using every conversation, every setback as fuel. He began drafting a proposal for reform, one that aimed to rebuild trust and accountability between the police and the people. Then came the pivotal moment, a chance to present his ideas directly to state leaders. Would they listen? The day of the presentation arrived, and the room was filled with a mix of anticipation and skepticism. The man stood in front of a panel of state leaders, armed with his proposal and the voices of his community behind him. He spoke with conviction, laying out actionable reforms and sharing personal stories that painted a vivid picture of why change was not just needed, it was urgent. For a moment, it seemed like the tide was turning. But just as hope began to rise, an unexpected roadblock appeared. One of the key officials interrupted, questioning his credibility and the feasibility of his ideas. The man could feel the weight of the room shift, the doubt creeping in. His heart sank, but he didn't back down. He responded with data, examples from other states, and most importantly, the human stories that couldn't be ignored. The stakes were higher than ever. The tension in the room was palpable as the man finished his presentation, his voice unwavering despite the pushback. For a moment, there was silence. Then one of the state leaders spoke up, a surprising ally who had once been a vocal critic of similar reforms. They acknowledged the depth of the problem and commended the man's courage in confronting it head-on. The room began to shift again, this time with cautious curiosity and reluctant nods. Just as it seemed the proposal might gain traction, another twist emerged. A last-minute report surfaced, detailing an incident from years ago involving the same law enforcement agency. It was undeniable proof of the systemic issues the man had been fighting to expose. The report left the panel stunned, and the momentum shifted fully in his favor. In the end, the reforms were approved, but the real twist. The man was asked to lead the implementation, forever changing his relationship with the very system he sought to reform. With the reforms now set into motion, the man found himself in an unexpected position of influence. What had started as a deeply personal moment of injustice had evolved into a statewide movement for accountability and trust. His role as a leader in implementing the changes wasn't easy. There were challenges at every turn, from navigating political resistance to rebuilding bridges with communities that had lost faith. But step by step, progress became visible. Training programs were launched, transparency improved, and lines of communication between law enforcement and the public began to open. The man often reflected on that day at the public event, realizing it had been the spark that lit this transformation. His journey proved that even in moments of humiliation, there's power in standing up for what's right. And with that, he left a legacy that would inspire others to keep fighting for justice.